Hello everyone, Luciano Oliveira, Oliveira Lawyers. Today Sunday, October the 26th, 3:32 Rio de Janeiro time, and I'm happy to see we have some of our friends already posting comments here in the chat window. Let's get started. So we have Edgar Richard. Bom dia, Luciano. I'm in Rio. Bom dia, Edgar. Good to see you over here. Edgar says, I signed my documents in your office here and waiting for the apostille. Glad you know things are working so far. I've been looking at real estate. I was introduced to a new developer. The project is huge. The Curie Group, should I sign an online contract? Edgar, in Brazil, online contracts, they are standard, right? So even here at the firm, whenever you're buying property, we actually get an online contract. So nothing wrong with an online contract. The issue I have with some of the developers in Rio de Janeiro is that they are going to push you. Actually, it's not the developer, it's more like the real estate agent who typically don't have a voice. They don't have a voice with the developer. And typically they're just going to say, listen, they're just going to tell you, listen, sign the contract and let's get it over, right? And the thing is, you need to know if you're going to have funds in country to pay the developer, because typically they don't accept payments from abroad. So there are usually some clauses to be amended, right, and to be adjusted so this transaction is going to work on your behalf. If you are buying for the purpose of securing residency, there are also some strategies that you need to couple with the acquisition as well. So if you're serious about buying property, I think a consultation would be recommended, Edgar. But glad to have you on board. Thank you for showing up. We have Neuza Cabral. Boa tarde, Neuza. Welcome to the live stream. Matt Gaines. Boa tarde, Dr. Oliveira. Matt and Adrian are on. Glad to have you both here. I received my apostille, the birth certificate from the state this past week. Glad to hear. That's an important accomplishment, Matt. And good news is for the birth certificate, typically for the residency application, there is no expiration date per se, meaning that even if you are applying, let's say in 2026, your apostilled birth certificate should still be good. Okay, just like I like to share, it should have your parents' names on it. That's the whole purpose of the apostilled birth certificate, to convey, through a legal document, your parents' names, which are part of the way that Brazil identifies a person. Okay, so but glad you know about this important accomplishment. All right, we have Christy as well. Good to have you here, Christy. I wanted to share with you just how happy I am so far with how seamlessly the retirement residence visa is with your firm. Glad you're here, Christy. I have a question. Let's see Christy's question. Is your firm connected with or able to assist with Brazilian healthcare insurance plan options for seniors? Yes, Christy. Yes, we are. We are actually getting, like a partner certified to provide such insurances. So far, what we are doing is to share an agent contact information whenever you're using our services, which is your case, right? So just ask for the resource you're working with for this referral, and they are going to get you this referral, and then this referral is going to check where you are geographically in Brazil, and share some of the options you could get in terms of coverage. Now, there is nothing, like precluding you from getting insurance. There are some good plans for seniors. All right, Chrissy. So just get in touch with your, professional here at the firm, and they are gonna get you connected to this health insurance agent. And something very interesting, Chrissy, maybe you know or maybe not, but in Brazil, I still say like health insurance, but in Brazil we don't say health insurance for some reason. Like we don't understand, or I mean, not. I do understand it, but the market, they don't see it as an insurance. They call it like a plan, right? A health insurance plan. That's how a health coverage plan instead of health insurance, like it is said in the United States. But I completely understand, and it is pretty similar, right? Like you pay a monthly fee, you have access to like a preferred network. If you're traveling, if you have an emergency, you're going to have services as well. There may be a copay or not. So the dynamics are very similar. It's just like the concept in the United States. It's seen as an insurance, and in Brazil, it's not seen as insurance, right? So this has some, impact on how the plan is regulated by the government. But again, from a consumer's perspective, this is pretty similar to what you have in the United States. Neuza Cabral, Doutor Oliveira, can the background check for the Brazil retirement visa be from the state, or it has to be an FBI background check? Neuza, so, whenever we are talking about immigration, whether in Brazil, in the United States, or Portugal, there is always some, discrepancy in terms of how different agents are going to review the requirements. So whenever we are advising our clients to secure the background check for the retirement visa, we usually recommend the FBI background check. Okay. Now, this said, we have approved many of our clients through a state level background check. Okay. So whenever we file an application on behalf of a client, we actually going to provide. It's not like an affidavit, but it's going to be like an application form as an attorney of record. And in this attorney of record, we are kind of vouching for the information being provided in an application. Okay, and we even provide this form as a type of authentication, or an additional authentication of your paperwork. So my take is that it does add an additional sign of trust to your application when you have an attorney of record. And from this perspective, again, we are able to approve many people through a state level background check, but that's not the ideal one. Now, if if you are able to easily get a state level background check, what we can do here at the firm is to take a shot at the application using this state level background check, and if it doesn't work, then we would work with the FBI background check, which is like the ideal one, right? So I hope that makes sense, Neuza. Donna Mendoza, good to see you over here, Donna. Hi, Luciano. Hi, Donna. Let me know how things are going for you. It has been a while. Marisa Navas, bom dia, Dr. Luciano. Amamos suas lives. Straight from Portugal, right, Marisa? Yes, it was so good. I met Marisa, I met Ricardo, and I also met Oliuni. I don't know if Oliuni is over here. Oliuni is always showing up in our live streams. I had the pleasure of meeting Oliuni in Coimbra, and we even took a picture, okay? And naturally, I asked for his permission to share the picture. Let me see if I have the picture over here. Yeah, so here we go. This is Oliuni. Oliuni is a client of the firm. He's a very successful entrepreneur, and it was such a pleasure, to have some Portuguese coffee in the city of Coimbra. So to the left side is our picture, Oliuni and myself, and to the right side is like this bakery. We actually didn't go into the bakery. There was like an outdoor area outside of the bakery, but I just added the picture so you can see the type of food you would find in a Portuguese bakery. And just because we were talking about Portugal, I also wanted to share just a quick video of the University of Coimbra. And if you don't know about Coimbra, right, like Coimbra is pretty famous because of its university. That's what you see in the screen right now. It's a large complex, and it's very interesting because it is probably one of the oldest, if not the oldest, universities in the entire world, right? And the first law degree issued by University of Coimbra is dated of 1290. So we're talking about, a law degree being taught in the 13th century, believe it or not. So that's University of Coimbra. There was a drone recording we did in Coimbra. So just sharing a little bit about Portugal. And we have, Marisa and Ricardo, they help us out with our office in Lisbon. So there you go. Going back here to the chat window. Again, thank you so much, Marisa and Ricardo, for all you do for our clients and for our office. All right, Donna is helping us out here, saying check the like button, click the like button. Thank you, Donna. Yes, if you are enjoying the live stream, do us a favor, click on the like button. This is gonna help us. With the rankings on Google. People are gonna find this content more easily, right? So you help our business, you help other people just like you find this content. Thank you, Donna. All right, we have BB. BB is saying the new Nomad Visa video is really well made. Great work. Thank you, BB. Appreciate the kind words. I was confused. If you apply for a consulate, if you need the birth certificate, when your passport already has parent details, and for getting married. All right, BB, that's a good question. So when you apply through the consulate, let's say if you are applying through a Brazilian consulate in the United States, the consulate typically is not going to ask you for the apostilled birth certificate, okay? Now, they would still ask you for the birth certificate, though. Now, if your passport already has your parent details, they shouldn't be asking for a birth certificate, okay? Now, interesting to note, just because this is such a customary ask, I could still see, BB, like some immigration agents, whether at the consulate level or in Brazil, asking for a birth certificate, right? So I'm always cautious about saying, well, if your name is on the passport, don't worry, you're not going to need a birth certificate, all right? So I wouldn't go that far. I would say you most probably will be just fine for the purpose of applying through the consulate. Now, regarding the second question about the marriage, I would strongly recommend you. I would strongly recommend you to get an apostilled birth certificate, because when you're marrying, like they want to have other biographical information that they could find in your birth certificate. And even if you have your parents' names on the passport, the cartório, the registry authority, would still want to see your birth certificate to make sure that the information on the passport is correct. All right, BB, I hope that was helpful. Kenny, all right, so that's a continuation. All right, that was actually the second part of a prior question. Kenny says, Boa tarde. I'm suffering trying to open a bank account as a foreigner. I'm waiting for my ID card from federal police, but they said it could take months. Can I send the money directly to the seller, or do the notaries have escrow services? Rendimento Online Bank has bad reviews, and for a large transaction, seems to be sketchy. What do you think? Kenny, so yes, until you get the resident card, right? Until you get the resident card, traditional, typical banks, they are not going to open a bank account for you, right? Even though the protocolo, the printout you get when you attend the appointment at the Brazilian Federal Police, it is legal for all purposes. Banks, they decided to be like more conservative and say, listen, once you get the card, come back and we're going to open a bank account for you, right? So that's the sequence. We work with Banco Rendimento, and we actually assist with the money transfer with not only Banco Rendimento, but other 4 banks that kind of do the same type of service. And we actually work with their back offices based on contracts we have with those banks, right? And the problem, I don't think, like they are risky, right, in terms of not getting your money eventually released. The problem is, like, there are many pieces of information missing from the puzzle for a first-time buyer, right? So you would assume you just make a wire transfer. If you are from the United States, maybe using Chase Bank, maybe using Bank of America, Wells Fargo, U.S. Bank, whatever bank you use, you would assume you just make a wire transfer and the money should show up, at the other end, right? So that's not how it typically works for any remittance over $10,000. There is always a compliance process, and this compliance process is much heavier than most foreign citizens would expect, right? So they would review the contract agreement, the purchase agreement. They would review the property title, right? And it's always surprising to me when people are trying to buy properties in Brazil on a possession-only basis, right? Like, I would never do that myself, and I'm a lawyer, I'm Brazilian, but I still see many people interested in such types of properties, right? And a Brazilian bank would never typically release money for this type of transaction. But so there are many pieces of the puzzle, Kenny, that are typically missing from the transaction. Okay, now. Again, in terms of Banco Rendimento, we work with them. We never had any issues in terms of trust. Of course, there are issues with the compliance process, and they are actually very conservative in terms of the compliance process. So if you cannot explain where your money is coming from, or if the property doesn't have a property title, a proper title, many times the transaction is not going to go through. And then if you're signing a contract and you are unable to pay for the balance, you know what's going to happen. You're going to have like a fine that typically starts at 10% of the purchase price, and it could include the damages as well, right? But again, I mean, just to finish up on a positive note, I trust Banco Rendimento, all right? And I actually like them. So in terms of trust, no worries there. In terms of the process, a lot of worries there, all right? Like, I mean, it's not as straightforward as you would think, okay? You may want to schedule a consultation because then depending on the specifics of your transaction, you may get more understanding of the process, of timeline, and this way you can make an informed decision in terms of signing a purchase agreement for a Brazilian property. All right, and final note about the notaries, right? So there was a recent law authorizing notaries to handle escrow in Brazil. That's something very new. I would tell you that most of the sellers they would shy away from using a notary just because this is something new, and like typically the seller wants the money to be sent directly to them. And then if you ask, well, is it safe, right? Like, I mean, just think about a transaction in the United States. You would never send the money to a seller up front. So here at the firm, we typically don't allow a client to send the money up front to a seller. We typically use currency exchange banks to emulate an escrow, right? So we don't actually have real escrows, but we emulate an escrow in a sense that through a trusted currency exchange bank, we can time the release of the money. And naturally, we're going to time the release of the money with the day of the closing, meaning, the day when the seller is going to be signing the deed of sale. That's going to be the day when the resources are going to be released to the seller. I hope that makes sense. Neuza Cabral, can a Cuban-born U.S. citizen that lives in the U.S. get his birth certificate to present to the Brazilian government? Right, Neuza. So the U.S. Sometimes they issue a kind of certificate of birth abroad, right? That's something we saw in the past. There is also, right, like the possibility of asking a service provider to get your birth certificate in Cuba. And a third route that is typically available to U.S. citizens, I don't know about other nationalities. Many times, if you have like a simple copy of your birth certificate, let's say if you are a U.S. citizen and you are in Brazil with this regular copy of your birth certificate, you could get a kind of certification from a U.S. consulate while in Brazil. Okay, so these are some of the different routes, Neuza, that you could consider, right? So checking if you could get a certificate of birth abroad from the United States. You could check if you can get like a service provider in Cuba to get your birth certificate in Cuba, or if you have a plain copy to check if the Cuban consulate in Brazil would help authenticate this regular copy for you while you're in Brazil. BB, with the bank balance pathway for DNV, do you still need some kind of work contract to be shown, or just the balance is enough? Digital DNV, I'm going to assume is the digital nomad visa with the bank balance pathway. Do you still need some kind of work contract? Yes, BB. That's a common question we get a lot, right? And I like to answer, and I'm not like, it's not a joke, but it's more like, to make this answer crystal clear. If there wasn't a requirement for a work evidence, this would not be the digital nomad visa. This would be instead the $18,000 visa, right? Because if there is no requirement for work, I mean, this is not a digital nomad visa. That's actually a money visa, meaning that if you have 18,000 sitting in the bank account, like, you're good. So the concept is different. Like, you need both, the money component, and you also need the work component as well. Kenny, or do the notaries have escrow service? Yeah, this one answered. Neuza was answered as well. BB was answered. YY, is there a specific region of Brazil, a particular city or location, a particular city that is noted for artists or interior design firms? Such an interesting question, YY, right? So, like Rio de Janeiro, it's pretty, I think, pretty iconic for, artists and interior design firms as well, right? Like, I mean, that's what comes to, the top of my head. There could be like smaller towns, but for sure they're not gonna be as meaningful as Rio de Janeiro would be, and maybe in a close second place, São Paulo City, right? So Rio de Janeiro and São Paulo would be my guesses for your question, YY. Donna, I'm currently in Arizona visiting the grandchildren. That's such a lovable trip, I guess, right, Donna? Glad to hear you are enjoying some quality time with your family, and that's the beauty, right? Like when you are based in Brazil, you can always travel back, to the U.S. or to another country if you are from a different country, right? Like you don't need to get stuck in Brazil, right? Like actually, flights between Brazil and the United States, they are typically pretty affordable if you plan ahead of time. Glad to hear from you, Donna. Okay, Matt Gaines, Dr. Oliveira, could you tell us about homeowner insurance for homeowners in Brazil? Homeowner insurance has become extremely expensive in the U.S. Yes, Matt, I know that, and it's crazy because in some areas, like even with the current rates, insurers, they're still gonna draw, they're still gonna quit a market just because it does not matter how much they are charging. Like even with those crazy rates, they are unable to make a profit, right? So it looks like the problem is actually more structural in the United States, if you will. But fortunately, this is typically not the case in Brazil, right? So in Brazil, home insurance is usually affordable. And yes, when you get to that point, we can, connect you to an agent to get you different quotes for coverage in Brazil. But again, typically much more affordable than they are in the United States. I discussed about the reasons, about some of the reasons in the past. The cost of a workforce and materials is going to be one of the components that's going to make home insurance more affordable in Brazil. The second one is like the style or quality of the construction. In the United States, you use like, a lot of drywall. You use wood. There's some shells that are used for the exterior. And in Brazil, we rely heavily on bricks and mortar. and like very often, even if you have like flooding, damage is not going to be nearly as extensive as it would be if we were talking about a construction in the United States, right? So, in the United States, if you have flooding, typically, you're going to need to basically just rebuild the entire home, and not in Brazil, right? Not in Brazil. So this is another reason why, home insurance is substantially more affordable in Brazil. All right, Matt, that's the good news. Neuza, I asked about the state background check because my partner has a clean state background check, but the FBI would show some incidents from over 30 years ago from the previous state of residency. All right, Neuza. So, stuff from 30 years ago is typically not harmful, but I understand the concern. All right, Abdul, can I get a digital nomad visa if I am a crypto and forex trader? So, Abdul, that's a kind of common question we have in our consultations. I cannot discuss about your specifics, but what I can tell you is that typically the Brazilian immigration authorities, they are going to want like some type of contract or letter showing that you are working for someone, right? So if you're doing like crypto and activities such as short-term investments like day trading, this type of thing, typically the Brazilian authority is not going to understand that as a digital nomad work, right? Even though it does sound to me like very compatible, because digital nomad means that you were working remotely, but the immigration authorities, they typically will require a letter from a trusted third party that not yourself, right? They need someone else vouching for your digital nomad activity, right? And like the trading platforms or crypto platforms, they don't provide such letter. So unless you are working with a third party, like a firm that could vouch for your work, it may be a long shot, right? Not impossible. Something interesting to share, particularly consulates, like they have more discretion, or they have like different interpretations of what a digital nomad would be. So, for an application in Brazil, I would say a very long shot through a consulate. It would be more in terms of the discretion of the immigration officer reviewing your paperwork. All right, Kenny, does a birth marriage certificate that has multiple languages, including Portuguese, still need to be officially translated for notary use? In the European Union, birth certificates can be requested in multiple languages. Kenny, so typically the Brazilian immigration wants, like whenever there is something that is not in Portuguese, they want to have it translated, right? It sounds like a kind of a weird a request, but the point is, like, if there is other stuff written in the document in a language other than Portuguese, like they feel like they cannot assume they understand what is written there. So even if there is a Portuguese version, as long as there are other languages on it, typically they would require a translation for everything, right? Now, there is also discretion in terms of the immigration officer, so maybe, like they would allow you to use as is, but here at the firm, we typically recommend a sworn translation, right, to make it easier for the immigration officer to approve your paperwork. All right, let's take a break. Let's talk about Remax. Lots of questions about purchasing real estate. Right, there is at least one question today about purchasing real estate through Cudi. Cudi is a major developer in Rio de Janeiro, and in Rio de Janeiro we have our partner. We have our partner agency from Remax, right? It's Remax Nomad States. So it's not any Remax, it's a specific Remax based in Rio de Janeiro. They are actually operating across Brazil, but their main location is in Rio de Janeiro, and you can get in touch with them to discuss about your property needs. And whenever you are working with Remax Nomad States, like we try to have, at least when they are taking care of our clients, they are gonna follow standards that are close to the same standards we use here at the firm. Okay, like I said, in Brazil, unfortunately, there is a lot of corner cutting, right? A lot of realtors or real estate agencies, they're gonna cut corners. Like I said, sometimes they're going to be selling properties without a legal title, which is just always shocking to me, but that happens a lot in Brazil. So whenever you work with these specific agents of Remax, first thing, like they are connected to Remax. Remax, as most of you know, is a major real estate network from the United States, also operating in other countries such as Brazil, Portugal, and so many other countries. And the Nomad States agency from Remax, they work as a partner of Oliveira Lawyers, following most of the standards that we have here at the firm for foreign citizens to properly buy and get what they are paying for whenever they are purchasing properties from Brazil. There you go. And going back here to the chat window. All right. BB, thank you. So just to be clear, a freelance contract or on-off projects proof bank balance for DNV should work. There is no monthly income, hence can't show salary slips. So, BB, when we get to this level of detail, I have two challenges here in terms of answering your question. It starts to become like I'm providing advisory specific to your case, which we cannot do based on the Brazilian bar regulations. That's the first challenge I have. The second one, there is also, the matter of discretion from an immigration officer, meaning that if I tell you, yes, it works, and then it doesn't work, you're gonna, naturally get mad at us. So at this stage here, it's difficult for us to provide you further advisory, all right? And to have things properly done, even in terms of the letter that you're gonna need to provide, it is recommended that you have, advisory through file the application to increase your chances. Kenny, after selling a home in Brazil, is it as difficult to move the money out as it is to move the money in? Kenny, yes, typically yes. Meaning that you're gonna need to go through the same compliance process, right? So whenever money is getting in Brazil or leaving Brazil, there is never such a thing as, you do a wire transfer and the money goes to the recipient. There is never something like this. Whenever money is going to cross border, meaning over $10,000, right? Because under $10,000, I'm sure, everyone here knows about Wise, Remitly. There are so many apps out there that actually do a great job in terms of facilitating cross-border remittances. But whenever it's more than $10,000, then it's a different ball game. And yes, once you're gonna try to send the money, to a different country, they are gonna ask for things such as your tax return, right? They want to make sure that you're filing your taxes. They want to make sure that you have that property in your tax filing. For instance, right? That's just one of the main requirements that they are going to have. But yes, you're going to need to go through the red tape. Now, a good thing about selling the property, let's say if you're selling the property 5 years down the line, and then you're sending the money abroad, the supporting fact for you to send the money abroad is that you sold the real estate, right? So typically that's the main basis for the bank to allow you to send the money abroad, right? Particularly if you've been owning this property for a while. Okay, Jeff Stories. What type of visa is issued to a content creator, someone earning online? Jeff, that's the same challenge I discussed for another participant here in the live stream. There is nothing really appropriate for content creators, okay? Content creators would have a challenge in terms of getting evidence paperwork that they are working for someone, and that may be a tricky case. I'm not saying it's impossible. We have strategies here at the firm. We typically try to work with alternative paperwork, okay? But there is nothing really targeting content creators, unfortunately. Activity. All right. I'm buying right this Wednesday an apartment, and the money is transferred the day that the contrato particular is signed in the escritório pública. The money is already in Brazil. My attorney is here. All right. Thank you for sharing. Matt Gaines. I'm looking at my apostilled birth certificate. The state of Missouri did not write this apostille in Portuguese. Will this create a problem? No, Matt, that's not a problem. Typically, the apostille is going to be issued in the language of the state in charge of the apostille process. So, yes, it's just natural that the apostille is going to be provided in English, and there is going to be an additional step in Brazil in which the document must be sworn translated, right? So after the sworn translation, what you're gonna have is gonna be like the original apostilled birth certificate in English, and then the sworn translation in Portuguese. All right, Matt, all good. BB has another question. If you get documents apostilled, how long are they valid for use in Brazil? BB, typically there is no expiration date for the apostille part of it. There may be an expiration date for the underlying document, and that's an interesting question, BB. So let's say for a birth certificate, if you are applying for a digital nomad visa, or if you are applying for the real estate investor visa, most of the time, the Brazilian immigration, they are not going to care if this document was issued and apostilled, let's say, a year or a couple of years ago, all right? Now, for instance, for the background check, yes, that's going to be a problem. Typically, the Brazilian Immigration Authority is going to require documents to be not older than 90 days. Right? So let's say if you got a background check 6 months ago and it was apostilled shortly afterwards, this document is not going to be good, not because of the apostille age, but because of the underlying document age. And this said, even within the same type of document, let's say birth certificate, depending on the purpose of the document of the application, you're also going to have different standards, right? So for immigration, typically they're not going to have an issue with a birth certificate that was apostilled a year or a couple of years ago. However, if you're buying a property in Sao Paulo, for instance, as a single person, you will need to present a fresher version of your apostilled birth certificate, typically not older than 3 months. All right? Oliuni, good to see you, Oliuni. Boa tarde. I just joined the live stream and rewinded the stream to see my pic. Glad to hear. It was nice meeting you, and thanks for your good service. Thank you, Oliuni. It was such a pleasure meeting you in Coimbra. And, I hope to see you again. Maybe next time in Brazil, right, Oliuni? But it was a really good experience. So happy to have met you over there. Donna, I used the Luciano for my visa and my home purchase. Definitely worth the consultation fee, which is used towards fees. If you choose it, then to represent you. Thank you, Donna. I appreciate your words. And we are very happy to have served you so far. And I know it's like, typically with clients like you, it typically is like a lifelong relationship, right, Donna? And we are very proud to have you as our client. Thank you so much for sharing those kind words. Let's see if we have anything else over here. If not, we're gonna take a look at our backlog. Let's see. All right, let's take a look at. I forgot to take a look at the Brazilian newspapers. That's something we typically do here. So this is Estadão. Estadão is like the second largest newspaper in Brazil, and the headline is talking about the meeting between Presidents Trump and Lula. And here, like the headline says, the first date between Trump and Lula is not a romance, but it is a convenience thing, right? And there was tariffs. There was the Magnitsky, application of this law on one of the judges of the Brazilian Supreme Court, and there was a lot of recently there was a lot of disputes between Brazil and the United States, and after a meeting during the United Nations, a conference not too long ago, maybe a couple of months ago, President Lula and President Trump, they met, in a place, and they schedule this meeting that you can see over here, and everybody is saying, it was a good meeting, and now the expectation is that maybe the United States is going to reduce the tariffs, and things are going to get better, right? Like between those two presidents. But this is like the main headline here. You see such a nice picture of President Trump and President Lula, right? Different perspectives on life, right? Like President Trump, a right-wing politician, President Lula, a left-wing politician, right? And my take is that nobody is perfect. They are trying to do their best. And, it's really nice whenever they can get along and reduce the gap, both in terms of ideology and, actually getting stuff done for the population. That's it. All right, let's go back. Let's go back to the chat window and see what else we have. We have Kenny. The consultation I can set up with you. Can I get the forex strategy to have the money ready for closing day? Uh, Kenny, I don't think it is like a strategy, right? Like, I mean, it's more like an introduction to the topic. Our consultation is like 125 US dollars, and if you allow me, like to be honest with you, I don't think the expectation is right to have like the strategy or to have a guarantee that you're gonna have the money ready for closing day through a 40-minute consultation for $125, right? Typically, when we work with clients to assist with just the money component, we charge 1,250 US dollars, and we walk them through the whole ordeal, right? Like typically, this is gonna take a while, and it does take a lot of interactions, right? Like, I mean, I would guess at least 100 100 interactions between you and our team, right? So that goes well beyond a single consultation, right? If that's the expectation, I would honestly recommend you not to schedule a consultation, because you're not going to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish, right? And yes, it's more a thing of 100 interactions than a single consultation thing. All right, Kenny, being very honest, so there is no frustration at the end of the day. MC Alaba, I'm here studying. I now speak Portuguese within a year that I am here. Good to hear. Congratulations. That's such an accomplishment. I would like to know the cost of a permanent residency application. MC, so, for you to apply for permanent residency, you should have some route to do so, right? And the studying is typically not a route for you to secure permanent residency, all right? And I know it is sometimes confusing in other countries, such as Portugal, for instance. If you study in Portugal like for 5 years, and yes, I know the law is changing right now, but so far, if you study for 5 years in Portugal, you can apply either for the permanent residency or the citizenship, right? Not in Brazil. In Brazil, if you study for 20 years, right? Of course, I'm just joking, but to highlight the difference, if you study for 20 years in Brazil, you don't get nothing. You don't get anything, right? You can't apply for anything. So for you to apply for permanent residency, you should have a route that would allow you to apply for permanent residency, right? And I can tell you a couple of them just to give you examples of suitable routes. One of them is going to be investment in real estate. So once you invest in qualifying real estate the right way, you're going to get first 4 years of temporary residency, and then before those 4 years expire, you can apply for permanent residency, right? So that's one available route. Another route is for you to apply through marriage. So let's say if you marry a Brazilian, immediately after marrying the Brazilian and getting, right, like all the documents, the many documents that the Brazilian immigration will require, you can then apply for the Brazil permanent residency, okay? And if you working through for the marriage route, even better, like if you have the Portuguese language, just a single year of permanent residency would get you access to the citizenship, right? So the mechanics here, MC, is that you need to have the right track to achieve the permanent residency and later on the citizenship, all right? I hope that was helpful. Kenny, because you mentioned that you use an FX account, like an escrow. Yes, Kenny. Yes, we do use. The point is there are many many factors going into this journey, right? And one of the factors is like if you have enough documents to get the transfer cleared, right? Very often, I can give an example, right? Just an example to help highlight the concerns we typically have with those transactions. Many people from Singapore, for instance, right? Like Singapore is a somewhat respected a country from a financial perspective. Is like a state country type of thing, right? Like it's small, but they keep their act together. However, in Singapore, at least based on our interactions with people living over there, they typically don't file taxes, right? And they pay taxes on, let's say, on the business or the company level, but they don't pay like personal taxes. They don't have a taxes paid on their personal level. And whenever like those people, they try to work with us, we have a concern that we're not going to be able to get them approved through the FX providers, right? So this is what we are talking about over here. It's not just a matter of giving you a roadmap. It's a matter of taking a look and walking you through all of those requirements that are going to be included in the money transfer journey, if you will, right? Okay, I hope that makes sense. We are about to get done, to get finished here with our time. I want to say thank you to all of you with such interesting questions today. Remember, our next live stream is going to be on Wednesday. And then on Wednesdays, we actually meet a little bit earlier in the day. On Sundays, we meet at 3:30 Rio de Janeiro time. And on Wednesdays, we meet at 12:30 Rio de Janeiro time. There is a live stream already scheduled for Wednesday. So if you want to participate, just go to our channel, click on the notify me, and then you're going to get a notification when we start the live stream, so you're not going to miss it. And again, thank you for the likes. Thank you for your participation, and wishing all of you a blessed